Our third and final panel, Adapting Consumers for Longevity.
Thank you much. Well, it's time to talk about what longevity means for the consumer experience. What do we want? What do we need? And what should we have? Joining me here, Tamara, Anne and Ian. I'll let you all introduce yourselves and your place in the longevity ecosystem. Ian, do you want to start?
Oh, well, okay. The age of 60, I started my first business. And that built on 35 years of working in the health service and a bit of policy work in government as a professor of geriatric medicine.
Anne?
My name is Anne Boden. I founded Starling Bank in my mid-50s. After a long career in traditional banking, I decided to start a bank. And it took me 2 years to raise money because a 5-foot-tall Welsh woman that spent her whole career in corporate is not the typical entrepreneur. And a shout out to Michael who's in the audience here today who spotted this unusual entrepreneur. But now, I'm here today because I stepped down from Starling a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden, I became a consumer in this world of longevity, and I came to the conclusion that I could afford everything in healthcare, and I could have all the wearables and things, and I could go and have a trainer, whatever. But the vast majority of people don't have that. And I started thinking about what we can do to widen the availability of these wonderful things that are out there, but are only available to the few.
Yeah, so much to come back to you on there. But Tamara, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Hi everyone, Tamara Raja. I have about 25 years in healthcare entrepreneurship, founded and ran a business called Live Better with, helping people live with chronic conditions, cancer, dementia and so on. And most recently, 5 years at Holland & Barrett, building digital solutions for prevention and for longevity.
And an app which I downloaded last night to make sure I was across it.
Did you track your biological age? We can come to that.
We will come to that. There's a lot to be said on biological age. First of all, let's start with you, Anne. You teased us with lots of ideas about all of the things that you are doing now and you would like to be able to democratise. Pretty impressive to have started a bank for anybody of any age, wherever they're from, anything. So you've obviously been on an incredible journey. Where you have come to now in terms of identifying what a consumer needs, because obviously that's something you have a lot of experience in. What do you feel we need to be thinking about as a priority in the longevity space here?
Okay, I'm coming from a position of having launched a bank to make things fairer for UK consumers. Like it or not, up until this big fintech movement, the people that couldn't afford the services paid most for those services. And it is possible to launch a proposition which is based on the very, very best technology that gives everybody a better deal. So, I came away from that thinking, well, I've done a fintech, do I want to do one of those again? Tick that box. Mid-60s, what could I do to make a difference? And I started looking at the whole longevity health span space and finding that a lot of the problems that I was coming across were to do with a fragmented system for lots of people, and the fact that if you are very good at tapping into this consumer world, you could get the best of everything, but the vast majority of people were having nothing. I'm addicted to these sort of things. I love tech and I love, pulling all this together. But like it or not, launching these sort of companies in this very, very complex world of healthcare is fraught with danger. Mm-hmm. Launching a bank and getting a banking license was difficult. Launching something that could actually fix 20 million people's health in the UK by using technology is next to impossible. So I haven't cracked it, but I'm working on it.
You're working on it. And the people who need this help the most are actually the least likely to even be thinking about needing it. So, Ian, how do you think that we approach that to get people thinking from a young enough age? Because, as we discussed earlier, we're ageing from the moment we're born throughout our entire lives. So how do we approach it early enough? How do we make sure people who are worrying about getting food on the table every night for their children are actually focused on this, doing it right and doing the best for themselves and the people around them?
Yeah, well, I think we have to look at two segments in the population. I think we have to look at people growing older throughout their lives, and I think what people are interested in is how to live longer. And I've done a few TV programs on that subject, and people are very interested, Tamara, for example, to do their body age, their brain age, their face age, see if they can change the parameters. That really excites people, and it can create behavioural change.
But are they really excited, or is this just the exciting headline? Is the idea of living longer just the thing that's clickable, the thing that people talk about? Don't most people just not want to get cancer and not get bad knees and be able to feel 40 at 80?
Well, it's the vitality of feeling younger, I think, rather than having a life expectancy to be older that unites most of us. Psychologically, you want to feel youthful, vibrant, and so on. And I think that's the catch to get people interested in that concept. But the other group, though, and I think we ignore this because if we emphasize too much healthy, long life, die as a young man at the age of 103, which I gather is Woody Allen's ambition. The problem is we ignore the fact that aging is a process that leads to physiological decline and problems. And my passion, and it's been my passion throughout my career, instigated by the professor of geriatric medicine in Edinburgh, Jimmy Williamson, who got me into all of this as a medical student, was that 2/3 of the things that seriously affect older people's independence and well-being are not even reported.
What are they?
So, number one, I can tell you, can anyone guess what the number one is? It affects 44% of people around the world. We've studied this in 50 countries.
Bad back?
It is. It's chronic pain. Well done. It's chronic pain. and it's, it's bad back and it's hip. And loneliness is fashionable at the moment. That affects about 33% of people above the age of 75 living at home. So there are all of these problems that older people face. And then if we connect it to the fact that came out earlier in your presentation, that there's so much disposable income that older people have, and yet older people themselves are not even spending money on themselves for the problems that are causing their suffering, their loss of independence, the negative impact they have on their families. So how do we, I think it's easier to help younger people want to live longer. It's more difficult to help older people to enjoy the best possible life and liberate their economic assets to be able
A slight
to
side conversation on this, but a lot of older people really worry about having enough money to see them through the rest of their lives and then don't want to spend money on looking after themselves, which is obviously kind of critical in this. How on earth do you help with that dilemma?
Well, older people don't want to be a burden. That's number 3 priority if you survey older people. They don't want to be a burden on their family, they don't want to be a financial burden, a physical burden, and so on. But at the same time, there's so many people struggle with their money. We ran a project in Bridlington where we got all the old people in Bridlington to complete an assessment of needs. And the number one thing they wanted to help with was financial advice. And we got the Benefit Centre to be aware that we were going to get a flood of people coming their way. And when they went there, they liberated £500,000 worth, more than £500,000 worth of unclaimed benefits. The word got out on the street. There's a paralysis of older people being able to report the things that matter to them for a whole variety of reasons. Partly, why bother about me? I'm old, I have to live with it. And I don't think older people have to or should live with many of the problems, including financial difficulties that they suffer from, when there are solutions if their needs can be expressed and they can be connected to your bank, or to your wellness programs.
I think, can I pick that up a second? You can see that, at the moment in the press, there's this obsession with inheritance tax and people who cannot afford to live worrying about how they're going to give legacy to the next generation when they should be spending it on perhaps a private hip replacement, okay? And this sort of feeling that people are elderly, beyond hope, right, and are going to decline, it's been encouraged by our media, to be honest.
Yeah, and strangely, this is actually a very refreshing conversation because this is the truth of ageing. And it's very easy to hear a lot of things in the longevity space being, say, healthy 25-year-olds trying to look after themselves when this is the reality that we're with. I visited one of the blue zones, Loma Linda, and met 103-year-old Mildred. And she had just had enough. She didn't know when she was next going to have any visitors. She'd lost her daughter 30 years before. Her son was bedbound. Every time she stood up, she was worried that she was going to fall over. And it makes you really question what health span even is, because she was a perfectly sharp mind, she was healthy, but she'd lost her sense of purpose. And there's actually so much coming together here. And when you talk to people who are actually living it, that kind of decline that you talked about, that is so many different areas. But we're talking about the practical stuff, we're talking about the financial stuff. When it comes to our wellness, actually what we can do for ourselves, which people often don't know what works, what doesn't. There's a lot of snake oil out there. How can people best approach it?
Yeah, so much snake oil. Trust is a huge part of it. And I think there's two bits I tie from the conversation so far. One is, there are so many, when you think about wellness and what's going to improve it, there's so many ingoing mindsets and goals. So it could be, I want to live as long as possible. It could be, I want to run a marathon. I'm 60 and I want to run a marathon next year. It could be, I want to be able to play with my children or grandchildren on the floor. It could be anything like, I want to be able to lift a suitcase out of an overhead cabin. Everyone's got a different goal and a different ingoing mindset. And some of the mindsets are towards illness, decline, and so on. And that's just how people think, which is, I don't want to have a heart attack. And then a whole other cohort of people are thinking, I want as much energy as possible for as long as possible. And so having a solution that, or multiple solutions, I'm not saying one thing's going to solve it, but having solutions that take into account people's mindsets and then also account for, your point, Anne, not everyone has the Oura Ring and the Apple Watch, and that's a small portion of the population who are A, able to afford that, and B, connected into that sort of data world and interested in, or naturally interested in that monitoring. So I think to your point on trust, it comes from being able to sort of meet people where they are in goal and mindset, and then bring them into a solution that is not only affordable, but sort of hooks them in and holds them in a way that is backed by science. And that's the bit of how do you capture someone's attention, and there's all kinds of scores and tools and so on. But then for someone to really trust it, you've got to not only just monitor and get the data, but you've got to show them this is what you could do about it, and show them that you can have measurable wellness outcomes. And that's not the language that you use to a consumer, but you've got to show them that something will change. You eat more fibre, you will have more energy. You sleep better or sleep longer, this is how you'll feel in the morning. You do strength training as well as running a bit. You will be able to pick up that suitcase a bit better. So I think the trust comes from making people feel like you really understand them, and that there's not this monolith called older people, which could be any age, to be honest. It's not just one big group. It's understanding and solving for that segmentation, making it affordable and accessible, but then really showing people that something changes when you do it, and you get that reinforcing loop where it's, if I do a bit more, or it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
I could do that. I could put a bit more protein in that recipe or something, and here's an easy way to do it. And then you see the difference and you go like that. But I think all of that comes to that trust point, which makes people feel, hang on, all right, this is believable. It's not an Instagram ad that said buy something.
Got to be wary of those.
Could I make the case for technology? So when I started Starling, people said, yes, but what about the old people? They can't use the apps. Well, the people in the 90s used the apps, and we started 10 years ago, and the people that were sort of 80 then are now 90. I think that I feel quite passionately about the fact that technology could be our saviour, but we can't afford individual people to coach people. We can afford technology, and we could afford one of these for every person over 60 in the UK. We can afford that.
And they are part of the government's 10-year plan, and there are much cheaper devices than Oura Rings and Apple Watches. And actually, the power of that data, especially when we're looking ahead to a future of preventative medicine and recognising patterns, those changes in sleep patterns that could indicate someone might want to be tested for dementia. There are lots of different things that, and already countless people being diagnosed with heart conditions, even cancer, predicting lupus episodes by the changes in that data. And obviously, the more that we collect, the more we're going to understand about what risk is when. So I guess there's an element here of needing to educate people in the simplicity of the technology, because once they do use it, as you've seen with the app, they can.
Yes.
Just knowing it's not scary or difficult to embrace. How do you think people feel, especially older people feel, about their data?
Okay, the people are really, really worried about sharing their data and, so what does it actually mean? However, once you do it once or twice, you get used to it. I'm now loading up all my blood results into all these various apps. I was terrified of doing it. Well, what if, so this is private information, to hell with it. If I get better input, if I get good feedback, that's worthwhile. And people, have started using, the thing about Starling was, we created not just a change for the customers that use Starling, we got the other banks in the UK to smarten up their act and do a better job for everyone. We need a couple of these initiatives to nudge people in the right direction. So the whole of the industry, the whole of the healthcare industry starts embracing a different way of actually helping individuals.
Ian, where would you prioritise?
Well, on the technology point, I think it's about the trusted source. So the NHS app, for example, is a trusted source. And I think that's where people could get a lot more of their health-promoting information. I've just come back from Taiwan, and there's a lot of scams of older people in Taiwan. The older people will not take cold calls, and the government are telling old people, do not take cold calls. So you need the trusted source, like a company like ASUS. So it's not just the public service that can be trusted, it's the trusted private company brands as well. But there was one point I did want to come back on, if it's okay. Your mention of the blue zones, because we can paint this picture of, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans everything in old age. And while it's important to recognise problems, living longer into old age can also be the great joy, unlike that lady you spoke to. I interviewed the oldest man in the village in Sardinia that has longest male life expectancy in the world for an ITV programme called 100 Years Younger in 21 Days. And he told me about the reasons why he was living to this long life. And it was the usual things. He was a shepherd, he was going up and down the hill, they had a nice community, he'd meet with his mates, they had great food. And this old lady came up to me and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, I'll tell you why he lived longest in the village. She said, he slept with every woman he knew, apart from me, because I was best friends with his wife. So he was clearly enjoying himself into his later life. And I think we've got to...
You'd have thought the stress of that could have actually been a negative.
So I think we just have to get the balance right between recognising that old age comes with problems, but it also, it's life, isn't it? And there is nothing to stop older people using technology. We create technology with older people in mind. And in fact, the really great thing I think about technology, and particularly with AI coming in, is one of the problems with responding to the needs of older people is to do with complexity. Because by the age of 75, you're going to have things going wrong in at least 5 of your body systems. You're going to have things going on in your social and environmental aspects. You may have a bereavement, you may be losing income. So how do you get your head around all that complexity and find the 1 or 2 things that might help that person enjoy a better life? And that's where I think AI will...
Because the GP can't do it. right? The GP does not have the time to actually look at the consultant notes across 5 or 6 specialisms, understand the stats, and come up with a plan. AI can do it. I know I believe in tech, and I've always believed in tech, but I think this is what we need to embrace because we don't have enough people to do it.
Indeed. Well, I'm with you on the tech, absolutely. And we also need to understand what's going on in our bodies, in what ways we're aging. You were just talking about biological age. It's actually fairly early days for how useful all these biological age results are, even something like glycan age, which has the most steady results. This inflammatory aging and immune aging test that you do to a blood test. And the actual figures, the exact years it tells you, aren't necessarily anything very meaningful. But of course, what you can see are patterns. And something I've heard be talked about is bringing the idea of biological aging tests, once they get better, to supermarket level. So these are tests which would be subsidised, like lateral flow tests. Someone would pay a few pounds for it. They'd then get that money back off their shopping at a later date to make sure the adherence to it. And these would be put at the checkout in some of the most deprived areas where people need them the most, to be able to be sent some tips on what they might do better and see how these patterns happen. Is this realistic, firstly, and is this an approach that makes sense, or what things would you prioritise in?
Well, I'm talking to Daiichi Sankyo in Japan, who are they own the largest pharmacy chains, and they're looking at exactly this thing. They've got a very ageing population. Their business model is based on footfall. So how do you get older people to come in and spend on all the products? I bet Holland and Barrett have looked at this. And put in a friendly robot that will say hello to you when you come into the store and will ask you about your aging. And will do your biological age, they'll do your body age, your brain age, they'll take a scan of your face, they'll give you your face age, and then they'll say, would you like to consider XY products? I think this is coming, and I think we should look east, because the countries, the developed countries in the East are the ones that have experienced the most rapid transition to an aging society, and they're innovating like mad. And they're succeeding in many cases. I mean, the average 80-year-old in Japan, I was told by the president of the National Center for Geriatrics and Gerontology, the average 80-year-old today is as healthy as the average 70-year-old was 10 years ago.
Really? Wow.
Can I say something about motivation? And it is easy to tell people what they should do to improve their health. And if you were to test somebody and the answer came back not what they expected or not what they wish it had been, I think you can have a chance of turning a lot of people off.
Yeah.
All these tools are very, very good for the people that are very good at them. And only work if you're on a downward, getting younger trajectory. And we all know, sort of the vast majority of people who have, sort of weight problems or fitness problems, whatever, they all know what to do. The question is, there's something stopping them doing it. And those sorts of tests, whatever, will still drive away the vast majority of people who want to do something about it, but cannot do something because of motivation issues.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely very relevant. How do you see this playing out from a Holland Barrett type perspective? Because one of the things that people long for is an easy solution, and will often want to believe in things that aren't necessarily even going to work. They want the quick fix. People want the magic pill because we know what we should do. It doesn't mean we will or can do it.
I think there's a couple of different kinds of diagnostics. So if you are looking for, if you get a blood test and it says you have a high cholesterol result, it's kind of, it's right there telling you, here's your diagnosis, and you think, okay, I've got to do something about that. That's one type of diagnostic. I think what is your point, Lara, on the numbers don't really matter on some of these things. It's a trigger to change the motivation from, well, I know I should eat a bit better, I know I should sleep a bit better, but I can't really bother to do anything about it. It doesn't need to be the most scientific DNA methylation test that says, here's my precise biological, or my precise anything age or score.
Yeah.
It's just, if you have your actual chronological age, and you have another number, and it's different, your human psychology tells you, hang on, that's interesting, and can I do something about it? And then it comes to the solution point, which is if you can quickly tip someone from, hang on, okay, you got your score, here's the solution, and you can guide them through them. And that's where technology helps, because from here's your score, here's what you can do about it, and here's the little nudge. To your point, everyone knows, but no one has, most people don't have that extra push to do something. So it's how smoothly you can get someone to say, oh, that number's a bit different. Oh, I could do something about it. Oh, here's the stats, and this is where UX and UI is so important, because you immediately show, 90% of other people who tried adding this to their diet had this kind of result. And you can show stories, you can engage people, you can have trusted distribution channels through pharmacies and so on who are helping promote and telling the story around this. And then you tip it from, it's not really about that test, it's about changing the psychology and mindset and getting someone on a journey. And then your next job is how do you keep them on that journey for a bit longer. So I think there's such a spectrum of diagnostics, and one end of it is really that blood test that diagnoses something so particularly and tells you, take that thing.
Yeah.
But really that mass solution is around triggering a whole population to just doing little changes to build.
And it may not feel great to be the chronological 40-year-old who's got a 60-year biological age. As you say, it can actually be utterly demotivating. But I suppose there's two things here. There's the motivation. There's also the understanding of what things can do. I was talking to someone who'd been doing a study on frailty, and she was just getting people to make small interventions to do some heel lifts, because we're talking about people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Do some heel lifts, eat a piece of salmon, like just things that are actually so simple but can make the difference, because it can be incredibly intimidating when you're already dealing with a lot of other health deteriorations, those other 5 things you might have by the time you're 75.
And the paradox with very old people and frail people is that people would think, well, they're too old, they can't do better. But often the intervention is the most effective in the very elderly, frail population. For example, this was dated when I was a medical student. I was told this. I don't know if it still applies today, but the average 75-year-old living in Edinburgh in 1977 did not have enough strength to step up onto a bus. In fact, only 1 in 5 could. 20% of old people could not get on a bus. But with a minimal amount of physical activity, 4 out of 5 were capable of doing it. So it's your point about the small changes directed towards improving independence and well-being can make a really big difference.
And the data is incredible between the kind of no exercise and a little bit. You don't need to be pushing really hard. So I suppose it's getting that message out there that you're not, this is a bit like why we do 5 a day and not 10 a day. You've got to actually set a target for people which is going to bring them, on balance, the right benefit. They're going to be willing to do whatever the thing is and actually benefit from it. So if we were going to take the greatest things that we could focus on, to prioritise on, to have the greatest impact later in life, I'd like to hear from each of you what your focuses would be. Where would you go?
Okay, I looked at the blue zones and I thought there were 8 things in priority order. Number 1, social connection. So if you just want one thing, social connection. And by the way, purpose is really important as well, that you were mentioning. I'll tell you the other 6 if you want, or afterwards. I don't want to hog this one.
Oh, quickly run through them.
Okay, number 2 is physical activity built into your daily life. Number 3 is breathing clean air. Number 4 is new mental activity. Number 5 is how you cope with stress and how well you sleep. And that's menopause is really big on that one. I know you've talked about that, haven't you? Number 6 is diet and nutrition. And the interesting thing is it's not what you eat, it's how you eat and whether you eat for joy. So socialising eating, why people in southwest France have a terrible diet, live a long time, is because they eat differently. How they eat, is differently. Number 7 is self-esteem. So when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you see an old person who's like your grandfather? I do now. And that can diminish your sense of worth. And interestingly, it affects men more than women in later life. And then number 8, that wraps it all together, a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
They would be my 8 top tips.
And that's the self-esteem thing. Professor Hal Hershfield in the US, I don't know if you've read anything of his work, he's done some stuff on that it does really impact how old you behave, how old you feel, literally how you look in the mirror.
Absolutely.
So we think it's just vanity, it's not, it goes beyond that. And what would you say?
I think it's a question to you, actually. I heard that people that have successful ageing tend to think that age is a horrible thing, and lots of old people are in dire straits. However, it doesn't apply to them, and they actually are breaking the mould. Is that true?
A lot of old people think other people are the geriatric frail people and not themselves. I mean, older people are the most ageist people of all the age groups that there are. So no, that is true. But I remember one of my first patients with this 104-year-old lady with dementia on a long stay ward, and she was a joy to meet because she thought everybody was the dentist. So you go up and see her and say, "Oh my dear," she was ex-colonial, "how lovely to meet you. You're the dentist, aren't you?" She said, "I've got all my own teeth. They're grown on the premises." And she had 1 or 2 teeth left. And that was the fact of her life.
Most people aren't so keen to see the dentist.
No, that was the fact of her life that she held on to that gave her a sense of self-esteem.
So what else would you prioritise, Anne?
I think that the NHS, our healthcare system in the UK, is not sustainable. I think that we have to have a way of getting good advice and solid results and interrogation of the results in a consistent way to as many people as possible. I think that we need to have AI across people's medical records so that we don't have all these inconsistencies. I think that we need to deliver it in a way which is that people can consume. AI has lots and lots of problems with it, but it could solve the biggest problem we have at the moment with an aging population. That population is going to get bigger and bigger. How on earth can we deliver what they need in a way that we can afford?
Absolutely. Research shows people are far happier to give their data to the NHS and it be used with AI for whatever purpose than to tech companies. Not just a matter of trust, but also worrying about who's making money from it. So we've kind of overcome a lot of the issue of how many people feel about that data. But it seems such a struggle to make the change, even where we know it can be a lot kinder and it can save money. Do you think we can get there?
I think private companies need to do it. I think that, private companies need to work on taking all the data from various places and be brave and launch something, even though the regulatory environment is really, really difficult. We don't solve problems by saying it's difficult. We solve problems by being brave and investing.
Yeah, and nothing worth doing is easy. Tamara, what do you think we should be doing? What should we be prioritising for a better older age?
So I think mine is a top slice of Ian's list. So nutrition and diet, and I really do think food is medicine and food is prevention. Protein and fibre would be top of the list, and fibre maybe eclipsing protein a bit. Physical activity, strength, in addition to cardio, and that's the main thing. Sleep, quality of sleep, as not just the hours, the ratio of core, deep and REM sleep, and it's how you get this across to a mass population. And then emotional well-being, which I think captures a lot of what you said. Emotional well-being, both connection but also stress.
Yeah, that's hard to create.
It's very hard to create, and it's again a lot of little things. It's none of this is like a big bang. Here, go and do that. And I think where things go wrong is these hyper-personalised solutions that say, here's your big cocktail of 100 things you need to do, rather than do you have what's one thing you could do to help your sleep? What's one thing you could add into your daily routine? Recognising that you're busy and you've got lots of other things going on. So that's what I prioritise. I think the NHS as a trust symbol is really helpful. I think things like ORCA accreditation, which is where a lot of the apps are reviewed, and you get that stamp saying that the data is safe and cyber has been looked at and all of that. And if you can translate that into just general language, what does that mean when an app has been endorsed by ORCA? This is not stuff that people know. So there's a big marketing exercise about things that are already going on. here there is a library of solutions, of apps that have been stamped, but people don't know about them.
No, and people don't have the time to go and do their own research.
And it's intimidating because you cannot tell the difference between this and this and it looks like everything's trying to solve the same healthcare issue. They're really not. They're separated. And I think your 5-a-day point is huge because what is that public health intervention? 5-a-day stuck. It's really simple. But what's the next version of that? Because you don't need government to come along and prescribe stuff, but government saying, here's the slogan. What is it? What's the next thing? And people picking up on that, and then private companies can help deliver it.
Yeah.
But a national banner of something is how you get that sort of mass behaviour change, and that 5-a-day is a great example of that.
And for a lot of the people who are in the worst health, who are the least focused on this, getting the message across of those small things. Because you hear a lot about, and it's in the papers a lot now, it gets so much attention, the people who are really trying to optimise their health.
Yes.
And it's like there's so far that you can take it all with lifestyle, with how you eat, how well you sleep, exercise, and that's all the massively important stuff. How much of a difference are they making with those extra little things? I don't know. Do they get to diminishing returns? But actually what we need to do is be dealing with these people who need the most care, the most change in their diets to get the message out. But do you think consumers know what they want or what they need? How much do you think they know?
I think our press is very, very confusing. You know, everybody has to have another article every January about sort of this, new fad. I think that there's a huge amount out there which is wrong, to be honest.
It has to be embedded in people's lives, I think. Mm-hmm. It's not that we've got this wonderful product, you must do this so you'll live longer. There has to be a draw. And I think it's really hard because we've got to deal with inequalities issues because the most well-off people are the ones who are most attracted and early adopters of living longer. But what happens to people that are disadvantaged? And I remember we did a BBC show on daytime TV called How to Live Longer, and we took folks from the public and gave them a 6-week reprogramming. But there was a lady that really stuck in my mind who was a single mum, poor, living in Durham, and her only outlet was to go up to Newcastle on Friday night with her best friend Shaza, I kid you not, get preload on a bottle of cheap vodka, get wasted, and Shaza would end up somewhere at the end of the night, and she would come home. She did this because she wanted social connection, and you could tell she was actually a very, she wasn't a sort of nightlife queen, but she was missing the social connection. So the solution for her was to go to a local dance class to learn salsa dancing in her community, where she met a man who was 10 years younger, fell in love with her, and they, went off into the sunset together. And, obviously her biological age scores improved massively as a result of that. So how do we give people in all their unique, wonderful, different lives at all stages some simple advice that will work for them? And it's not just 5-a-day or so much exercise, because these are the generic principles. I think it's also what's going to work for you.
Yeah, and Holland & Barrett obviously has a lot of supplements and things to sell, but also, based on the app and what I read about it and downloading it last night, it seems like there is a general health picture you want to try and embrace with people. So you're clearly recognising that there's an appetite for this and that entire system is something that people want to be part of.
That's it, and it's about holistic health. So I think what you said is absolutely right. Around 20% of the population are trying to work out how to put dinner on the table. Yeah. And it's a real luxury to even think, can I add some salmon? I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And all of these general things need to be tailored. And I think that's where technology can help, because you can use technology to take that general principle. Somebody literally inputs their context. I have £30 a week to spend on food for X people. I want to stick to these principles. I live in this kind of area. I don't have access to a gym. and you can tailor it, and out can come, okay, this is the little habit you could do, which might be try and eat an apple a day. I don't you know, it could be so simple that will make a disproportionate difference. But I think that is where technology can tailor these nudges to build the healthy habit that's relevant for you in your situation, with your income, your lifestyle, your age, whatever it is. And we've got the input data from all of everybody's input, or everybody's work in this space can go into that to say, add all these different parameters together, and here is that solution.
Yeah.
I think it's that tailoring, and that's what at Holland About, and I know others are doing the same, is trying to think of health a bit more holistically. Yes, the supplement sales will come, but that's not the point of this. It's to look at, take these principles and try and make it very individualised, no matter what.
And the other thing the technology allows us to do, we're assuming that these are becoming very accessible and cheap to everybody, is to see how your body is responding to any changes
that's
you
the
make.
outcome point.
So
That's
even
exactly it.
even
That's
if
it,
somebody gets this, oh no, I'm 40, my biological age is 60, you can actually see those gradual shifts start to happen, and there it all kind of comes together. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so any final closing thoughts? You can all have your last word. Ian first. Or do you want to think about it, and I'll come to Anne?
So.
You have a thinking face. Anne?
It has to be fun. We talk about longevity because, you know, we think about it as being a long life. We think about it as being having a healthy health span. But majority of people are dealing with chronic illnesses, and a lot of those chronic illnesses have interactions, and that is where AI can do a huge amount to figure out the path through this for our future.
Yeah, absolutely the reality. Tamara?
I think for me, if we're talking about prevention and health span, it is about really thinking about it in terms of empowerment and reward. So changing that language to here's the energy you can have, here's how your day will feel different, and making it super specific to a situation. And technology can do that.
Ian, you look like you stopped thinking.
I've thought, and I actually, my thought is really to bring it back to the population level, and Andrew's work is that we've talked about the individual. We have to create the conditions for individuals to live longer, healthier lives and spend less of their life experiencing difficulties and costs in the system. And Andrew's work shows that that is the best thing we can do for our economies. And therefore, it actually behoves government to rethink policies for ageing and for older people because of the economic imperative. And I'd settle it there. I'd like to settle it on the individual, but I think about it as the population. I think that's what we're about trying to create now.
Yeah, well, we've covered it all in the conversation. Ian and Tamara, thank you so much.
Thank you.